So yes, I'm Mary Helmers, and actually I will be exiting my role in a few months since I am retiring. I've been in CF for over 38 years, first on the floor, and then the last 30, almost 2 years as a coordinator off and on, but the last 23 years continuously as a coordinator. Did adults and then back to peds 15 years ago. And you're probably wondering, what is my path to parenthood? But actually I do have a path to parenthood that relates to CF, oddly enough. And I'm sure I'm going to stun a lot of people today. A few people know my story, but not many. So we were trying to have children and found out that my husband actually has absence of the vas deferens. And then we were at a clinic in Los Angeles, and a physician from Italy was doing a study on cystic fibrosis and absence of the vas. And could we draw blood, et cetera? I'm sure you've never heard of this disease. And I'm like, I'm the coordinator for a CF center. Long story short, my husband is a homozygote R117H and does have CF. Much different than the CF I knew when I started 38 years ago. But still, it was kind of a joke in our household because he coughed a lot and he was very salty with his sweat. And I'm like, if I didn't know better, I swear you had CF. He did, but not in the sense of the CF that I knew when I started in 1985 at the old Chaz. But needless to say, it did impact our lives in a different way. But we have two boys after many attempts. Our oldest son, Matt, will be 29 in September, and he was our Belgium-made child. And our younger son, John, just turned 26 a few days ago, and he was our blue-eyed, blonde-hair, American-made child. So they are carriers. Fortunately, I wasn't a carrier, and back then they couldn't test for all the mutations that they test now. So we are very lucky. But needless to say, I will be making sure their spouse or partner gets tested for every mutation possible. So struggles we had were just, for me, not hearing no that we weren't going to have kids and wanting to get the best care. Unfortunately, when we did find this out, this whole world in CF was just coming out that fertility clinics were finding these men that have very rare mutations, were either carriers or very mild mutations at the time. And so we were lucky that we got on the cusp right when it was cutting edge of being able to go into the fertility world and have procedures to be able to have our own children. The one other thing that was a big struggle for us is that all the literature at the time said men with CF were sterile, and that's definitely not true. They are infertile. And so I think maybe the reason this all worked out was because this was my path. CF was my path in life to work at. And I did a lot of education with the adult males in the clinic, and even the newborn parents that come in if they wanted to try other options to try to have children without having them have CF. So I've done a lot of education. Like I said, I'm sure I'm shocking a few people today if they're online and virtual, but that's my story. And now I'm going to introduce Matt DeFina. Matt is 45 years old and living with CF. He earned a bachelor's degree of science and a master's degree in business administration. He owns and operates a successful winery in the Napa Valley and works full-time as a joint replacement representative for Stryker Orthopedics. Matt has received 2 double lung transplants, one in 2012 and another one in 2020. Matt and his wife, Denise, have been married for 20 years and have a beautiful 15-year-old daughter, Gracie, who is a freshman in high school.
Thank you, Mary. First of all, I'm going to set my stopwatch here, give myself a hard stop at 10 minutes because anyone who's ever heard me speak knows that I can be a bit long-winded. So I'm going to do my best to tell our story in 10 minutes or less. This is very much going to be a Reader's Digest version. I'm going to unfortunately leave out some details, but in the interest of time, we'll do our best. So first I want to say thank you to Siri and everyone at CFRI for having us today. It's an honor to be here speaking to all of you. You know, so with regards to becoming a parent with CF, anybody who has CF knows that no matter what topic we are talking about, the path to the desired outcome is rarely a straight and easy path. CF likes to complicate things, and the path to parenthood is no different. It's a very winding and rigorous path for some people, and for my wife and I, that was no different. So we were married in 2003, and we knew right away that we wanted to have children. And so, having CF, naturally, our first option was to go through the IVF process. We started the IVF process with UCSF. As soon as we started doing the IVF process, we found out that my wife is also a carrier for CF. Didn't know that before then. And so, of course, that added some complications. The first round of IVF, unfortunately, produced no viable embryos. So obviously that was very devastating to us. We waited a short time and decided that we would go through it once more. The second round of IVF, we were able to get pregnant. But just a few weeks into the pregnancy, we found out that our baby had a very rare chromosomal abnormality, something that was completely unrelated to CF, unrelated to the IVF process. It was one of those things that we were told was literally like a 1 in a million chance that this would happen. It was a condition called hydrops fatalis, and she had developed something called a cystic hygroma, which is kind of like a fluid-filled tumor that had developed on her neck. When this happened, the neonatologist advised us to abort the pregnancy. Personally, that's not something that we believe in. So we decided to move forward with the pregnancy anyway. When my wife was about 27 weeks along, she went into emergency preterm labor, and we rushed to the hospital, and via C-section, we did deliver a beautiful baby girl who we named Madison Faith, but unfortunately she only lived for about 10 minutes. Again, very devastating turn of events for us. And so we took some time to grieve for that process and decided to try it one more time with the IVF. The third time around, again, produced no viable embryos. So at that point, we started to think, you know what, maybe IVF is not the route that we should be taking. And so at that point, we started looking into adoption. We lived in Fresno at the time, and we got hooked up with an adoption agency. And we had thrown our name in the hat for a couple of options with some children who were available. Nothing had worked out for a little while. And then it was January, I believe it was January 3rd of 2008, our social worker called us and said, hey, this brand new baby girl just came into the system yesterday, and mom wants to give her up for adoption. And she said, you guys want to throw your name in the hat? And we were like, sure, let's do it. But, because we had been rejected a couple of times before that, we weren't exactly optimistic that we were going to be chosen. In addition to that, we found out that this child was down in San Bernardino. We were up in Fresno. So because of the space, we thought, maybe that might work against us. When you go through the adoption process, you have to put together a profile. It's almost like Match.com. And so you put together this profile, and you have to say everything about yourself. You obviously have to disclose. I had to disclose that I had CF. My wife was actually born with one arm, on her left arm from the elbow down, that is missing. And she was born that way. And so that was also something that we had to disclose. And so on paper, we're thinking, man, we look great. Here's this guy with this lung disease and this woman with one arm. Like, who's going to want to give us their kid, right? And so miraculously, a few weeks later, we received the call that we were chosen by the birth mom. And so we, hightail it down to San Bernardino, super excited, very happy. And we end up having this meeting with the birth mom and her social worker, which again was a very awkward kind of Match.com type of meeting. And come to find out, one of the reasons the birth mom was giving this child up for adoption was because she struggled with meth addiction, and she also drank, smoked, and she did all of these things in the first trimester of her pregnancy, but then said that she had stopped once she found out she was pregnant. Long story short, one time when she was at a meth party, she passed out, and while she was passed out, she was bitten on the arm by a brown recluse spider. If you know anything about brown recluse spider venom, it's very neurotoxic. And so she waited over 24 hours to seek medical attention because she didn't even realize what had happened. Well, the venom from this spider actually ate away at the tissue in her forearm, which resulted in this tremendous gash or crater, if you will, that had developed all the way to the bone. It looked like someone took a giant spoon and just scooped out all of the muscle and soft tissue in her forearm. In addition to that, the nerve damage required her to amputate her 2 middle fingers. So she had this gross deformity in her left arm. And when she saw that Denise was missing a left arm, she felt this initial and instant connection with her because they both had these issues. So one of the issues that we thought was going to work against us was actually one of the reasons why we were chosen to be parents. So it was just absolutely amazing that it worked out that way. So we go down to San Bernardino. We end up adopting this beautiful young baby who we named Gracie. And there's a picture on there actually of me holding Gracie for the first time. I don't know if you can back up or not. That one right there. So, and I can tell you that in that picture, you know, one of the more amazing things that happened is in that moment that you're looking at right there. I just had this this overwhelming sense of peace and just this calmness that came over me, which just told me that she's the one. So, a side note, I'm a transplant patient, so I take prednisone, and I blame it on the prednisone. You know, prednisone makes me very emotional. So I cry when the 49ers lose. I cry when the Giants lose. I also cry when I talk about my beautiful family. But I had this overwhelming sense of peace and calm that just came over me that told me, this is the little girl that was meant for you. And immediately all the anxiety, any anxiety that I may have had prior to that, as far as becoming a parent, just immediately vanished. And it's hard to explain, but it was just one of those things where I just instantly knew that things were going to be okay, and that this was the little girl for us. And so, you know, and so we went through with the adoption process, and things have been absolutely smooth ever since. And, you know, I can tell you up here as a parent who's adopted a child that biology does not matter. You know, there's so much more to parenthood than whether or not your child has the same genes as you. You know, anybody that knows Gracie and has seen Gracie, you would never know that she was adopted. You know, ironically, she looks just like my wife and I. And yeah, there's a picture right there. And so that's kind of our story in a nutshell. Again, the process of adoption was great. It was very smooth for us. And parenthood has been amazing. It's given me a sense of purpose. It's given my wife a sense of purpose. And it's just been a lot of fun. So let's see how we're doing on time. I think I'm probably getting close to my 10 minutes here. So yeah, so I think that's my story. I also want to make sure to point out that my beautiful wife and daughter are in the back standing there. So you guys can say hi. That's Denise and Gracie. So again, thank you for hearing out my story, and we'll be answering some questions at the end. So thanks a lot.
Lucy, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
So Lucy Barnes is a 34-year-old woman with CF who lives in Ashland, Oregon. She is the mother of 2 sons and works as a professional birth and postpartum doula. Lucy received her Bachelor's of Arts in Psychology from the University of California, Santa Barbara. She loves the outdoors, and on the weekends, she enjoys going to see live music, tending the garden, hot yoga, and wrangling her backyard chickens. Go ahead, Lucy.
Okay. Hi, I'm Lucy, and I just wanted to start by saying thank you for having me. I feel really honored to be here. And so, yeah, so I will get started. I'm Lucy. As you all know, I'm 34 and I live in Ashland with my 2 sons, Charlie, who is going to be 6 in August, and Heath, who is 4.5. I'm also, as you now know, too, a birth and postpartum doula, and I hold circles in Ashland for people who are pregnant or newly postpartum. I'm also hoping to start a birth center at some point with some local midwife friends and birth workers. So if there are any leads on angel investors that you might have, you can send them my way. So my journey with CF started at birth. When I was just 2 days old, I presented with meconium ileus and had surgery to remove that blockage and spent 2 months in the NICU. And yeah, as a child, I feel like my CF was relatively mild, which I feel really fortunate for. It was still like very present in my life with, going to various doctor's appointments, doing annual tune-ups in the hospital, various medications, and just the kind of normal CF protocol that people with CF have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. I always knew, I think the one thing that I have always been certain about is that I wanted to be a parent. And so when I was 26 years old, I was kind of presented with this ultimatum of, your chances of having children are getting slimmer, and, basically you kind of need to act fast and, try to get pregnant now or, not at all. Due to cystic fibrosis and also some abnormal cells on my cervix. So at the time, as a 26-year-old, I was definitely not feeling prepared to be a parent, but after a lot of deliberating and, determination, I decided it was a clear yes. And so me and my partner at the time decided to try to have a baby. And so that picture is me and my first baby Charlie, who was conceived after 2 IUIs. And so we had done testing, my partner had done testing, and he, in fact, was not a carrier of cystic fibrosis, which I think at the time wouldn't have made a difference to us, but it was a bonus. So Charlie was conceived, and at 32 weeks of pregnancy, my water spontaneously broke. And so I was admitted into the hospital where they had me on a magnesium drip to slow labor, and we're hoping that his lungs would develop, which I think is at the 34-week point when lungs in utero develop. And so they were hoping to get to that point. And then at which point I was going to be induced, which I did not want to do. And so I think it was at 33 and 6 days that I went into labor on my own. And so I had an unmedicated vaginal birth with my doula and partner, which is what I had always envisioned. It was a very long labor, but he was still at 34 weeks. He was still really early. So after about 30 minutes of skin to skin with him, he was rushed back to the NICU and spent 2 weeks there learning and developing his suck swallow reflex. I was pumping, and at the time I hadn't started Trikafta. I started Trikafta in 2020. So this was 2017. So I was still, I was pumping. I was like always on a machine. I had like either the pump or my vest, and I was like constantly kind of juggling all these different machines, and being a parent with a child in the NICU. And so that was, a big adjustment. But after 2 weeks, he got to come home with us after passing the car seat test. And then we spent, 9 months with him at home. And so, 9 months after Charlie was born, I had 2 mornings of suspiciously throwing up my breakfast and took a pregnancy test and found out that I had gotten pregnant as a surprise with Heath. And so that pregnancy was a lot more challenging. And I think I noticed my CF a lot more in that pregnancy. I was not only throwing up every morning and having a really hard sleeping, I had a hard time with sleep. But I also was noticing like kind of just feeling a little bit more lethargic. And I think I got sick a couple times, as well as also chasing around a 1-year-old. And so at 31 weeks with Heath, my water broke again early and spontaneously. So I was rushed to the hospital and was anticipating a similar experience with Charlie, where I was going to wait for a couple weeks on bed rest and then maybe have another vaginal birth. But I had something called placental abruption a couple of days after being in the hospital. So started bleeding heavily and was rushed back for an emergency C-section, which went well. He was born very peacefully. But he was still at like, I think 30, just under 32 weeks. So he was then rushed back to the NICU and put on a CPAP machine, and then had to be transferred to Stanford, where his intestines weren't fully developed. So he had to have intestinal surgery. There was a period where they thought that he had cystic fibrosis, which was extremely stressful, even though we had tested my partner in our first pregnancy beforehand to make sure he wasn't a carrier, which he wasn't, but they still were not convinced. But eventually, after like multiple tests, we found out that Heath is a carrier. He does not have cystic fibrosis though. But yeah, he was in the NICU for a couple months with a colostomy bag, again, pumping. Wasn't on Trikafta yet. So I was doing my treatment and pumping and driving back and forth from Santa Cruz, where I lived at the time, to Stanford. But after 2 months, he was brought home and with a colostomy bag for a couple months, and then it got taken out. And now once his digestion started kicking in on its own. And since then it's been working great. So now fast forward, they're very full of life and very healthy and free. And they're in, like the higher end of the percentile. Heath, I think he was born at 3 pounds. I was trying to remember today, 3 pounds, 4 ounces. And at 1 year old, he was in the like 98th percentile for height and weight. We just adopted some baby chickens. So that's been a fun adventure. And it's been really special being a part of this panel and being able to look back and relive kind of my story and be able to tell it here and recognize like how much strength and determination it did take to get them here, but how it was so worthwhile. And I'm so grateful that we have them. And here we are. We experienced our first snow day in Ashland last year. Charlie, my oldest, was romping around in the snow naked, which made me realize that we are not in California anymore. And I'm very much raising Oregon children, which was really just, I don't know, it was just a funny and really serene and sweet experience. And but yeah, I think just thinking about where I'm now, where I feel like we're all really healthy and happy and feeling like things are going to be okay, and just like so grateful for Trikafta and all that it's done to take like just responsibilities and stress off of anyone with cystic fibrosis who's on its lives, but especially parents where they have an array of other responsibilities. And it kind of feels like amnesia thinking about it was only 3 years ago that I started taking it, but like, it's like the before times where I don't really even, I don't know, I can't even like envision going back to doing treatments and all of that all the time. Like, I just feel so fortunate that and all the advancements in medicine and yeah, just to be here and be a parent. And I'm excited to be here, and thank you. And that's my story.
Thank you, Lucy. Next, Carl Robinson. To my left is a 45-year-old living with CF. He's been working in technology for over 3 decades and manages multiple people around the globe. Carl is the father of 2 daughters, age 6 and 20 months. When he is not working, he is tending to his beehives, and I got to benefit from a bottle of honey today. Doing home improvement projects, having fun with his family, and helping his mom, Ann Robinson, age gracefully. Here you go.
Thank you, Mary. Yeah, I've known Mary all my life. She's helped take care of me, and is seeing a lot of people around the room. I haven't been to a conference in several years, and it's just it's nice to be back in the room with a lot of very like-minded individuals battling this kind of disease. And growing up, when I was born, like I said, the life expectancy was not very high. And now, now my doctor talks about statins and other things that I need to now think about. And part of all that conversation was also about being a parent. I knew I wanted to be a parent. I knew, first off, you have to find the right partner to have a child with. It definitely is a team sport. At least having a good family and having a good community to help out there. And I found her, and we went head first, feet first, whatever, a whole body into knowing how to have children. Vas deferens, we knew that wasn't in, because I'm a double delta 508. So that's probably doesn't exist. Got the testing done through all the labs and through Stanford. And yeah, didn't have a vas deferens. So we went through IVF. Fortunately, we had a good first session with IVF with my wife. I say fortunate as in you get 19 eggs and 2 are viable. So it was like we were expecting more. I don't know if we wanted more than 2 children. We're not that young, but it was a very life-altering experience going through the doctors, checking off boxes, going to see these tests, that test. And we were fortunate to have a good center, a good doctor, and a little bit of luck. We were able to get everything in order, and from start to finish, maybe a year and a half, I want to say. We were fortunate to have a pregnancy that went past the due date. In fact, had to be induced. After 33 and a half hours of labor, had a C-section. And I have my baby girl right there. That's Everly. And she's probably still in the pool right now being a mermaid outside of in the hotel. And, having Orkambi, at the time I was on Orkambi, and that modifier just really made parenting, or at least the stresses of having CF and being a parent, be all much more easier. I remember just having the energy to run around after her, having the energy to do the night feedings and the day feedings and everything. Granted, I think everyone who does give birth needs a full year off with benefits and pay, because it really, kids are just absolutely monsters inside your soul, but they're the happiest thought, the most rewarding you can think of having children. It's not for everybody, but if you are into kids and new discoveries, it's just been amazing. And Everly has taught me a lot about things. And she has a great sad face, crying face that she did. And really just having her be with us in having, like, a little face that thankfully does not look like mine, looks like my wife. But just that growth was just amazing. And out of that IVF treatment, those two embryos, they all come back, normal, chromosomally normal. We didn't do much extensive testing in utero. We knew my wife was not a carrier, so that wasn't really a thing there, but we were talking about exotic because they do have Irish background. So I think my mom was a little bit, you're not a carrier. But having that healthy child, having a healthy pregnancy with their trials and tribulations, every pregnancy is different. And me being the one with the CF definitely made it a little easier than if I were the mother. I know for a fact that I probably could not be pregnant. I would not do very well. I don't have that kind of strength. But the strength in me comes from my wife, comes from the family, that the community that surrounds me, and we Trikafta now really makes things a lot easier with the 3 modifiers. And here we are pregnant with our second child. So our other embryo, which was rated a little less than Everly, but you know what, totally fine. She's a monster though. And her pregnancy the second time around was completely different. A lot of different issues coming up with prenatal care and with the whole journey we had. And I believe this photograph was taken when she was 7 months. I'm not positive. I'm probably way off on that. But really just having a family and having the energy along with CF, along with the other new therapies, helping solidify the energy level needed to take care of these nuclear reactors. And there's my second one. I did demand a paternity test because she came out with a full head of hair. That doesn't happen. I was there this time in the IVF room getting transplanted, so I knew it was her, but still coming up with a full head of hair was a little shocking, especially because the other one was bald. But her being a happy, smiling, very large baby at, I'm going to say 9 pounds, where Everly was 7'4". So it was definitely, like I said, a completely different experience. The best experience I think I could have in a whole process, because one, we kind of skipped the line with the birth. We went straight to C-section, which put a lot of the stress away for myself and for my wife. And that whole day, I'll remember for the rest of my life. There was a lot more drama. My blood sugar was crashing. I had some other things going on at the same time. I'm like, not to be a diva, but I have this going on. This guy, she's like, really? I'm about to have a C-section in 30 minutes. So, but really that pregnancy went really well. I couldn't have asked for another healthy baby. And they have just grown and just leaps and bounds. Josephine, or JoJo as we call her, Josie, is just an absolute monster and will run around, put things in her mouth, laugh, giggle, run away from you as fast as possible. And as soon as you're cleaning up the mess she made, she's back at where you're sitting, stealing your cell phone and sending selfies to random people. So she is just adorable and really just grows on you like bacteria and doesn't let go. But having a family, having that livelihood of bedtime routine and having the story time and having the growth and daycare and feeding and what's that? It's perfectly good what you're eating. You want chicken nuggets instead? It's just all that conversation that I know I had with my parents growing up about you got to eat healthy. You got to, you got to make sure you're staying hydrated. You got to learn this. It's like, oh my God, I was a horrible person to my parents. And now it's payback. But they are just adorable. And I did not start my timer, so I have no idea what time it is. Okay. But no, thank you. I mean, yeah, it's just been a great, and all the other panelists here have their unique stories. And I just love hearing about them. And I love sharing, like Matt and I could probably talk for 5 hours, each of us, and love sharing about our passions. And part of that passion is, of course, our family and having that unit. Thank you very much.